She survived war zones, commanded troops, and earned every stripe on her uniform. But the battlefield that nearly broke her, a quiet street in suburban Virginia. Her name is Naomi Grant, a black brigadier general with over 20 years of decorated service, a woman who's faced down enemies abroad, only to be assaulted by ignorance at home. That night, she was off duty. No uniform, no entourage, just a woman driving home, until a young white cop pulled her over, questioned her existence, and within minutes slammed her to the pavement like a criminal. Why? Because she didn't look like she belonged. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't check her plates. He didn't care. He just saw a black woman in the wrong neighborhood and decided to make her feel it. What he didn't know? He had just handcuffed one of the highest-ranking military officers in the country, and when the footage leaked, America exploded. This wasn't just a wrongful arrest, it was a national disgrace, a federal trial, a civil rights movement reborn. Because when rank meets racism, the silence doesn't stay silent for long. So before we dive into this firestorm, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, because this story, it's not just about Naomi Grant, it's about all of us. The checkpoint wasn't official. Two cruisers parked crooked across the narrow exit lane of the Fairfax suburban loop, blue lights spinning lazily, but no cones, no signs. Just two white officers standing in the middle of the road, arms crossed, posture wide. Brigadier General Naomi Grant didn't flinch when she saw them. She kept her hands at 10 and 2, as she had trained others to do. Her Chevy was spotless, her tags clean, and she hadn't been speeding. But this wasn't about speeding. Not tonight. Naomi was dressed in jeans and a plain black sweatshirt, her natural curls tucked beneath a baseball cap. She had just left her sister's home a few miles down, carrying leftover peach cobbler in the passenger seat. As she eased toward the cruiser blockade, one of the officers stepped forward, signaling her to stop with two fingers and an absent stare. She rolled her window down halfway. "Evening," she offered. The older of the two leaned in, scanning her face with subtle contempt. "License and registration," he said, before she could speak. "Can I ask what this is about?" Naomi replied calmly, locking eyes with him. The second officer approached from the rear, shining a flashlight through her back window. "You fit a description," the first one said vaguely. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Of what?" "A suspicious vehicle," the man snapped. Then came the question that sparked everything. "Do you live anywhere near here, ma'am?" His right hand hovered near his holster. Naomi took a slow breath. "I live about 3 miles east. Yes, in Laurel Heights." "That's not near enough," he muttered. He glanced toward his partner. "Run her tags." The flashlight clicked off. The younger officer appeared at her driver's side window, voice low and hostile. "You don't look like you belong here." "I didn't realize neighborhoods had a look," Naomi said evenly. "This is unnecessary. I'm not breaking any laws." "You got an attitude," the first one snapped. "Mind if we take a look inside the vehicle?" "I do mind, unless there's probable cause." That's when the younger officer moved. Without warning, he grabbed the handle and yanked the door. It was locked. Naomi's hand was already moving to her wallet, but her other hand instinctively hit the door lock again. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle," the officer barked. "Why?" "Step out now." The older officer's hand went fully to his gun. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Naomi froze. Her years of military training screamed at her to stay calm, to de-escalate, but something was wrong. Worse than wrong. This wasn't a routine stop. This was a power play. She had seen it before, overseas, in countries where badges came with unchecked authority. But this was home. "I'm reaching for my wallet," Naomi said slowly. "I'm unarmed. I am a brigadier general in the United States Army." Don't care what you are, the younger one sneered. You're getting out. Now. The older officer flanked her driver's side. Open the door yourself. Don't make us do it. Naomi reached toward the visor to grab her military ID instead. It was clipped beside her registration, laminated, unmistakable. Before she could speak again, the younger officer yanked the door open from the outside. Her seatbelt was still on. He reached across, unbuckled it himself. "Sir, back off," she said sharply, but her voice was lost in the clash of urgency and adrenaline. The older officer grabbed her arm. "Step out now, or we'll charge you with obstruction." "I'm not resisting," Naomi said, her voice firm now. "You are overstepping your bounds." The street was quiet, suburban. One porch light flickered across the cul-de-sac, but no one came out. Naomi's heart hammered, not in fear, but in fury. As they pulled her from the car, she heard the takeout tray fall to the floor, peach cobbler splattering against the carpet. "You're assaulting a federal officer," she warned, but they weren't listening. "Ma'am, hands on the vehicle," barked the senior officer. They shoved her against the trunk, and in that moment, Naomi knew this wouldn't end quietly. The younger cop's hand patted her pockets. "Nothing," he muttered. "Let's get her in." "You're making a mistake," Naomi said through gritted teeth. "Big one." "We'll see about that at the station," the older one said. "Someone's got to teach you people to cooperate." His voice dipped just low enough to reveal the rot beneath his badge. The cuffs were tied, deliberately. When they pushed her into the back of the cruiser, she didn't yell. She didn't beg. But her eyes stayed locked on the dash cam mounted on their windshield. "This recording?" she asked. No answer. Only the slam of the door. As the engine turned over and the cruiser rolled forward, Naomi caught her own reflection in the plexiglass barrier. She wasn't a threat. She wasn't a suspect. She was just the wrong woman, in the wrong zip code, in the wrong skin. But they didn't know who she really was. Not yet. Naomi's jaw set. Her silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. Because she wasn't just going to walk away from this. She was going to burn the whole damn lie down. Naomi slowly opened her mouth. "You'll want to look at that ID again when we get there," she said. "You'll want to remember tonight." The older officer scoffed. "Save it." But Naomi wasn't saving anything. She was storing every second, every word, every pressure point, because the truth had a way of coming out, louder, bigger, and sharper than any badge. She leaned her head back against the seat, eyes closed, lips tight, and then, just as they turned the corner, a civilian car began to follow them at a distance. Someone had seen. Maybe someone had filmed. And Naomi knew this wasn't the end. This was only the ignition. The cruiser swerved off the main road and halted by a grassy stretch near the edge of a residential complex, just far enough from streetlights to keep things shadowed. Officer Mark Hensley stepped out first, the gravel crunching beneath his boots as he walked around to the back of the car. He was 28, impatient, and already reprimanded twice in the past year for unnecessary aggression. But internal affairs had shrugged both incidents off as stress response anomalies. His GoPro, clipped to the center of his chest, blinked once and then stopped recording, error code flashing red. He tapped it, frowned, and muttered, "Damn it." Still, no one checked, no one cared. Naomi Grant was pulled out of the car. She did not resist. Her posture remained upright, even with her hands cuffed behind her. "You can't hold me without cause," she said in an even voice. Hensley looked her over with narrowed eyes. "You think you're special, don't you?" Naomi didn't respond. His grip tightened on her upper arm. "I've dealt with your kind before." His voice was low, but soaked in resentment. The older officer, standing nearby, glanced around nervously. "Let's get her processed quick," he said. "The less noise, the better." Hensley wasn't done. "Face the car," he barked. "I already complied," Naomi replied. "You've done enough." "You don't tell me what's enough," he shouted. Then he shoved her hard against the side of the cruiser. Her shoulder hit the metal and she stumbled but kept her footing. Hensley's hand shot out again. This time he swept her legs from behind and forced her down. Naomi fell onto the wet grass, cheek scraping against the soil. She grunted but said nothing. The older officer stepped forward. "That's enough, Mark." "She was resisting," Hensley snapped. "You saw it." "No, I saw you assault her," the other man hissed under his breath. "Body cam's off," Hensley replied coldly. "She'll claim whatever she wants, but it won't matter." He didn't notice the boy across the street. 14-year-old Jordan Lee stood frozen behind the bushes on the opposite sidewalk. His phone was already in his hand, camera app open from earlier. When he saw Naomi shoved to the ground, he instinctively pressed Go Live. The light flickered on. A few friends joined, then dozens, then hundreds. "Yo," Jordan whispered to the mic, "this cop's going crazy on this lady, and I think, wait, yo, hold up, that's her. That's the general lady. She spoke at the Pentagon. I saw her on YouTube." Jordan zoomed in. Naomi's face was turned slightly toward the camera, even as she lay on the grass, her left cheek smeared with dirt, her dignity unshaken. Officer Hensley didn't stop there. He pressed a knee into her back. "Get up now," he demanded. "You're doing this the hard way." Naomi's voice came through, quiet but clear. "You're going to regret this." "You threatening me?" Hensley hissed. "Not at all," she said. "But you'll wish you had looked at my ID first." The older officer was pacing now, looking toward the road. "This spot's too exposed," he muttered. "Let's move." "No," Hensley growled. "She thinks she's smarter than us. I'm sick of these people with their badges and attitudes." "She has an actual badge," the other cop muttered, voice shaky. "Shut up." Hensley reached down, grabbed Naomi by the elbow, and yanked her upward with force. Her arm twisted unnaturally, and a low groan escaped her lips. "You're hurting her," the older officer said, stepping forward. "Stop!" But Hensley didn't listen. That's when Jordan's live stream jumped from local interest to national wildfire. Someone watching clipped the footage and tweeted, "This cop just body slammed a military general in Fairfax. What the hell?" The retweets exploded. People started joining the stream by the thousands. Someone tagged a military veterans group. Another tagged CNN. Hashtags erupted. Justice for Naomi had Brigadier down, but not above the law. Meanwhile, back at the scene, Naomi had been dragged to her feet. Her sweatshirt was stained with grass and mud. Hensley's expression was flushed, lips thin, eyes twitching. "Let me guess," he sneered. "You think someone's watching?" Naomi said nothing. She didn't need to. Her eyes were focused, not on Hensley, not on the cruiser, but on the small blinking red light of Jordan's phone across the street. She gave the faintest nod. Hensley turned. "What the hell?" The older officer followed his gaze and saw the boy filming. "We got a problem," he muttered. "Too late," Naomi whispered. "Your GoPro's dead. Mine's not." "What?" "I keep a dash cam inside, backward-facing, battery-powered, uploads automatically." For the first time, Hensley hesitated. Then he reached for her arm again, but the older officer grabbed his wrist. "Mark, back off. This is done." "We finish what we started," Hensley said through clenched teeth. "We're not done till she's processed." "No," the older man replied. "We're done the moment this turned into a lawsuit." But it was already more than that. Naomi wasn't just a soldier, she was a symbol, and someone out there had captured the moment the badge turned into a weapon. Hensley stepped back, breathing hard. "I'll file a resisting charge," he snapped. "She assaulted me." "Body cam's off," the older cop replied grimly. "No one will believe you, but they will believe her." Hensley turned away, cursing under his breath. Naomi adjusted her posture, standing straight despite the cuffs. Her eyes never left Jordan, and he, standing behind that bush, knew something monumental had just happened. "That's her," he whispered again to the stream. "The one who shut down the weapons contract scandal last year. The one who testified in Congress. That's her." In real time, the stream began trending. Reporters, veterans, activists, they were all watching now. The suburb of Fairfax, for a moment, became the epicenter of a storm. Naomi didn't smile, but in the center of her chest, her heart steadied. The truth had begun to leak through, and the people weren't just watching, they were recording. The cruiser's interior was cold and silent, broken only by the faint static from the radio and the harsh clicks of Officer Hensley's gloves as he adjusted them. Naomi Grant sat cuffed in the back seat, her wrists tight behind her, body stiff from the slam onto the ground minutes earlier. The interior lights cast an eerie glow over her expression, stern, unreadable. Hensley slid into the front passenger seat, pulled the door shut with a grunt, then swiveled around to glare at her. "Let's see what you're really hiding," he muttered, reaching toward the bag that had been yanked from her vehicle during the scuffle. The older officer didn't speak. He stood outside the cruiser, pacing nervously as his partner fumbled through Naomi's belongings. Hensley unzipped the side pocket of the bag and paused. A sleek leather wallet fell into his hand, and when he flipped it open, his eyes narrowed. Inside was a Department of Defense-issued identification card with the Gold Eagle insignia, and behind it, a polished metal badge engraved with her full title, Brigadier General Naomi R. Grant, United States Army. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. "You're kidding me," he said, holding it up. "Nice cosplay." Naomi didn't answer. Her gaze remained locked ahead, unflinching. Hensley leaned over the seat, badge dangling between two fingers like it was a cheap party trick. "You expect me to believe this is real? You think flashing fake brass makes you untouchable?" She didn't blink. "I didn't flash anything," she said calmly. "You never asked for ID. You assumed." Hensley's mouth twitched. "You trying to threaten me now, General?" "I don't need to," she replied, voice low. "You already crossed the line, and I promise you, by the time this night ends, you'll wish you hadn't." The moment hung in the air, sharp as a snapped wire. What neither of them realized was that Jordan's live stream was still rolling, audio perfectly clear despite the car's partially rolled-up window. The mic captured everything, the sarcasm in Hensley's voice, Naomi's restraint, and finally, that single sentence, "You'll wish you hadn't." It was the kind of line that echoed. Within minutes, viewers began clipping it and adding captions. One read, "The badge she didn't flash, but they should have asked." Another, "This is about to get very bad for someone." A third, "Play stupid games, win court-martial nightmares." While the video exploded across the internet, dispatch at Fairfax Command Center received a call. Not a normal inquiry, not a complaint. The voice on the other end didn't identify themselves by name, just a title. "This is the Deputy Director of National Security. I need a status report on Brigadier General Naomi Grant. Now." The woman on duty, a mid-level supervisor named Denise Ralston, blinked in confusion. "Sir, we weren't aware." "You are now," the voice cut in. "I want the name of the arresting officer. I want the body cam footage, and I want a live feed into that cruiser." "Sir, the cruiser is in motion. I'll have to reroute." "Do it." The line went dead. Denise stood frozen for a beat before snapping to action. "I need vehicle 2143 rerouted to Central HQ," she barked into her headset. "Now. Pull up everything on the detainee. All units. Code, priority, override." In the back of the cruiser, Naomi felt the vehicle jerk slightly as it slowed at a stoplight. Hensley had tossed her badge onto the front seat and was texting rapidly, eyes occasionally flicking toward the mirror. His face wasn't smug anymore. It was tense. She could tell something had shifted. "You sure you want to keep playing this game?" he asked suddenly. "You had your chance to de-escalate." "You're the one who escalated it," Naomi replied, "and you just proved exactly why I stopped wearing the uniform in public." "So what?" he snapped. "You expect special treatment just because you had some rank once?" "No," she said. "I expect the Constitution to mean something, even in Fairfax." His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "You don't know me." "I know enough," she replied. "You don't stop people for broken taillights on streets with no traffic. You profile, and then you panic when the person you target turns out to be bigger than you." Silence. Her words hit with the precision of someone used to tactical speech. Every syllable was measured. Hensley didn't reply. He picked up her badge again, stared at it like it might dissolve in his fingers. "Even if this is real," he muttered, "you don't scare me." "I'm not supposed to," she said. "The law should." In the command center, Denise watched as the car's GPS updated. The route had been diverted from county jail to the central holding facility. Simultaneously, a second screen began to flash with incoming media alerts. Hashtags connected to Naomi's name had reached trending status in 5 regions. Major networks were pinging for comment. And then came the second call, this time from a private number with a military code attached. "This is Command Group South. We need eyes on General Grant. I repeat, live visual contact. Get me that feed." In the cruiser, Naomi leaned back slowly, as much as the cuffs would allow. The seat creaked under her, but her eyes were steady. Her words were already being shared across the country, and every second that passed brought more eyes, more questions, and less cover for the officers who thought they were in control. Captain Emily Roche stood just outside the intake desk at Fairfax Police Department, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the monitor showing the newest detainee. She didn't like the booking notes. "Subject refused to provide ID. Detained for obstructing an officer." That didn't sit right. Roach had seen enough cases, twisted by assumption and ego, to recognize a red flag when it blinked. The woman in the holding cell wasn't loud, wasn't aggressive. She was still, controlled, watching everything. That wasn't the posture of someone caught breaking laws. It was the composure of someone waiting for the truth to catch up. Emily took a slow breath and pushed open the door to the intake room. Inside, Officer Hensley stood leaning over the processing desk, arms wide, voice louder than it needed to be. "Look, she wasn't complying, wouldn't answer basic questions, didn't have any ID on her. What was I supposed to do? Let her drive off?" "We're not talking about the stop," Roach replied calmly. "We're talking about how she ended up here with no formal ID entry. You said she refused to provide identification." "Yes," Hensley nodded quickly. "She said nothing relevant, just attitude." Roach's eyes narrowed. "So what's this then?" She pulled out a small leather case from the evidence tray. Inside sat a Department of Defense badge and an ID card with the name Brigadier General Naomi Grant. Hensley blinked. That's the fake one. I mean, look at it. Nobody carries around that kind of thing unless it's for show." "You confiscated a federal badge and called it cosplay?" Roach's voice dropped. "You booked a black woman in civilian clothes with military ID and logged her as uncooperative without verifying her credentials?" "It looked fake," he insisted. "She was evasive. You logged her as Jane Doe," Roach snapped, "despite the ID you're holding in your hand." The room went quiet. One of the desk clerks looked down, typing slowly to avoid being pulled in. Emily turned on her heel without another word and headed down the hallway. The security office was dimly lit, humming with rows of screens showing every corner of the department. She walked to the desk and nodded at the operator. "Pull up Holden Cell 4. Audio and video." The officer clicked through. On the screen, Naomi sat on the edge of the metal bench, hands still cuffed, posture upright. 2 officers were inside with her, one of them holding a clipboard. "Ma'am," he was saying, "if you just sign the citation admitting to disorderly conduct, we can expedite your release. No further charges, just sign." Naomi didn't move. "This is a false statement," she said clearly. "Signing it would be an admission of guilt. I won't perjure myself to make your job easier." "You're not making this easier for yourself either," the second officer snapped. "We're trying to help you walk out of here tonight. You cooperate, we de-escalate. You escalated the moment you ignored my rights," she answered. "Now you're threatening my freedom to protect your report." Emily leaned closer to the screen. "Zoom in," she told the operator. The image sharpened. Naomi's badge sat on the bench beside her, just visible beneath the edge of her coat. Roche froze. The badge's serial number gleamed in the light. She didn't need a forensic lab to confirm it. It was real. Her stomach dropped. "Rewind 10 minutes," she ordered. The footage jumped back. The same officers were entering the cell, clipboard in hand, closing the door behind them. One of them chuckled and said, "Let's see how long the fake general holds up." "Pause," Roche barked. She grabbed her phone. "Get me the chief. Now." The line rang twice. "Fairfax PD. This is Chief Halverson." "It's Roach," she said tightly. "We have a problem. A big one." "What now?" "The woman in Holden, Naomi Grant, is a real brigadier general. We have her ID, her badge, and confirmation from command. She's been detained under a false charge, her identity wasn't logged correctly, and she's being pressured to confess to something she didn't do." Silence on the line. Then, "Shut it down. Right now. Get her out of that cell and into a private interview room. Do not say a word to the press. I'll be there in 10. "Too late for that," Roach muttered, glancing at the second monitor beside her. News clips were already popping up. Viral video shows woman in uniform slammed by Fairfax police. Hashtags were rising. General Grant, @wrong woman, @justice delayed. She pocketed her phone and rushed down the hallway. As she neared Holding, the tension in the air was sharp enough to slice. She entered the room without knocking. "Step away from her. Now." The 2 officers turned, startled. Roach held up a sheet of paper. "This is a federal ID verification match. This woman is Brigadier General Naomi Grant. She is to be released immediately and escorted to interview room 1. You 2, report to Internal Affairs. Now." The younger of the 2 blanched. "Captain, we thought you didn't think. That's the problem." Naomi stood slowly, her eyes not on the officers, but on Roach. "You're the first one in this building to call me by my name." Roach gave a slight nod. "It won't fix what happened, General, but I'll make sure we start getting it right." Naomi followed her out, shoulders square, expression unreadable. Inside the interview room, the air was cooler, calmer. Roche sat across from her, fingers laced. "I need to be honest. Your case is out of our hands now. Calls have come in from the Pentagon, from the governor's office, and apparently even someone at Homeland Security. Whatever happens next, this department is under a microscope." Naomi folded her arms. "Then let's make sure the camera sees everything." Roche looked at her for a long moment, then turned to the monitor behind her. "Watch this." She pressed play and the screen lit up with footage from Hensley's body cam, except the feed glitched, stuttered, then went dark. "We're saying it's a technical error," Roach said bitterly, "but you and I both know what that means." Naomi didn't blink. "Then it's time to find a witness who didn't glitch." Chief Ryan McAllister sat in his corner office, surrounded by thick glass and thin silence. He liked it that way. From here, he could see the entire operations floor through the tinted window, observe without being seen, steer the department without getting too close to the fire. But today, the calm shattered with a single ring. The red line blinked. Secure line. Federal code. He stared at it for 2 seconds before picking up. "McAllister," he said, voice crisp. The voice on the other end was deep, clipped, controlled. "This is General Kessler, Department of Defense. I'm calling about a detainee currently in your custody, a Brigadier General Naomi Grant." McAllister didn't flinch, but his fingers curled slightly around the edge of the desk. "Yes, I was just informed." "Save it," Kessler snapped. "She was arrested under false pretenses, her ID was ignored, and your department failed to verify her rank, despite holding her credentials in your evidence locker. Do you have any idea what kind of diplomatic storm you're brewing?" "Sir, I understand the severity." "No, Chief, you don't, because if you did, I wouldn't have had to call. This isn't just misconduct. This is a national embarrassment. You're detaining a decorated, black female officer under civilian suspicion because she didn't look like she belonged. What exactly do you think you're doing in Fairfax?" McAllister exhaled slowly through his nose, keeping his tone level. "General Grant is being processed for immediate release. The issue is being reviewed. I'm not interested in your damage control. I want names. I want logs. I want every interaction she had since the moment she was pulled over, and I want them now." The line went dead. McAllister held the phone to his ear for another beat, then placed it down with robotic precision. He stared at the window, but didn't see the department anymore. The silence that followed was different, tight, dangerous. He reached for his intercom. "Get Internal Systems Director Martin in here. Now." A few minutes later, the door opened and a tall, balding tech administrator stepped inside. "You called, Chief? I need something taken off the record," McAllister said. "The secure call from the Pentagon. Erase it from our internal logs. No archive, no timestamp. Gone." Martin hesitated. "Sir, that line is auto-encrypted. It flags tampering. If I pull that record, it could trigger." "Then pull it carefully," McAllister interrupted. "This conversation never happened, understand?" Martin nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." McAllister turned back toward the window. "And, Martin, if I find out this reaches outside your hands, I'll make sure your next job involves parking tickets in Anchorage." The door closed behind him. McAllister tapped his fingers once, then twice, before finally picking up his phone again. Not the red line this time, but his private cell. He dialed a number from memory. A woman's voice answered on the first ring. "What is it?" "We have a situation," he said. "The Grant arrest, it went sideways. She's a brigadier general. Pentagon's involved." Silence. Then, "Do you want it buried or spun?" "Neither. I want it neutralized. We can't afford a viral implosion while we're under review for federal funding. Start by checking who leaked the video." "Too late," the voice replied. "It's already climbing. Military Twitters picked it up. Black veterans forums, too. This won't stay quiet. Then we find a counter-narrative. She was combative, uncooperative, resisting arrest. She's a national hero. That's a hard spin." "I don't need her reputation ruined," McAllister growled. "I just need ours preserved. Find the angle. Control the outrage." He hung up. In the hallway outside, Lieutenant Sarah Kane stood by the stairwell, hand in her pocket, thumb still on the stop recording button of her hidden mic. She had been walking to the chief's office to deliver the updated use of force audit when she overheard the call. She wasn't meant to hear it, but she had. And she had recorded all of it. She ducked into the ladies' restroom, locked the door, and played the audio back on silent. The chief ordering a deletion of Pentagon records, a direct attempt to erase federal contact from departmental logs. It wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. Sarah's heart pounded, not out of fear, but decision. She was 5 years into this department, had seen cover-ups, had bit her tongue. But this was something else. This wasn't bending a policy. This was rewriting history while the country watched. She knew she couldn't go public, not yet. That would get her shut out before she got traction. But she could move quietly, find the right ally, Roach, maybe, or even the Civilian Review Board if they hadn't been compromised. She exported the file, saved it too, an encrypted drive on her personal flash, and hid it behind a false admin folder labeled Roster 2016. Then she stepped out, breathing slowly, one step at a time. The chaos was only beginning. In the conference room on the second floor, McAllister had gathered 4 senior commanders. He stood at the head of the table, voice calm but clipped. "We're in damage control. From here on out, no officer speaks to the press. No files move without my sign-off. We are invoking media silence until legal gives us a clearance strategy. Anyone who violates that will face immediate disciplinary action." "What about Grant?" one deputy asked. "She's already out of the cell." Roach verified her identity. "The general's not pressing charges yet, but she's demanding a formal apology." "No apology," McAllister snapped. "We don't admit liability. Not yet. We wait. We stall. She makes noise. We offer an internal review. Buy time. Bleed interest." The room nodded. But Sarah Kane, standing in the hallway just beyond the glass wall, heard every word. She reached into her jacket, tapped her flash drive once, and whispered to herself, "You wanted this buried, Chief. Let's see how deep we have to dig." The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as Naomi Grant was led through the rear hallway of the Fairfax Police Department. Her wrists were still cuffed, her posture steady but simmering with tension. 2 officers flanked her, silent and stiff. When the group reached the processing room, a deputy with a buzz cut gestured to the far end of the wall. "Stand there, please," he said, tapping a clipboard. Naomi complied without a word, her head held high, expression unreadable. The camera sat mounted above an aging laminate desk, wired to a machine that hadn't been serviced in at least 3 fiscal budgets. "Face forward," the tech barked. Naomi stared directly into the lens. The tech frowned. "Remove her sunglasses," he said to the officer next to him. The officer hesitated. "She wasn't wearing any," he muttered. "I found these in her bag," the tech replied, holding up Naomi's dark-tinted aviators. "She'll wear them." Before anyone could respond, he slipped them onto Naomi's face. "What the hell are you doing?" she snapped. "Protocol requires a clear mugshot." "You're not in command here, ma'am," he said with mocking formality. "Just stand still." The camera flashed. Naomi's face, now partially obscured by the reflective lenses, registered as a blurry profile in the system. The tech smirked. "Guess we'll have to go with what we've got. Database will log it as is." Another flash, another blurry image. Naomi didn't move, but she knew exactly what they were doing, deliberately sabotaging her record to make it harder for oversight to verify she'd ever been there. Mugshots were one of the few data points that could escalate to national attention if they matched a high-ranking officer. They wanted hers unusable. Across the room, Officer Hensley leaned against the wall with a smug look, arms crossed. He tapped his phone like a man who thought the storm had already passed. What none of them realized was that the real storm was already online. Outside the precinct, a crowd had begun forming. Small, scattered at first, a few locals with phones out, a couple of veterans who'd seen the video. It had taken less than 4 hours for Jordan's live stream to crack 2 million views. A caption at the top of the trending clip read, "This woman is a general. This is how they treat her." Within minutes, a hashtag was born. "Salute her right." Comment sections exploded. Onlookers from across the country were demanding answers. Military boards lit up with questions. Why was a decorated general being pinned to the pavement by a rookie cop? Why hadn't anyone recognized her? And where was the apology? At Reagan National Airport, a plane touched down an hour early. A woman in a dark blazer with 3 service pins on her lapel stepped off the jetway without looking back. Vanessa Grant moved like someone with purpose embedded in her DNA. She wasn't just Naomi's younger sister. She was a rising star in the Judge Advocate General's Corps, a military attorney known for winning impossible cases and dismantling systemic traps that buried enlisted personnel of color. She had taken one look at the viral clip and booked the next flight. Now, her boots hit Virginia soil with the weight of a gavel. At baggage claim, her phone lit up with messages from contacts, both civilian and military. One of them had sent her the mugshot. They blurred her face. The message read. Vanessa zoomed in. The photo was practically useless. Deliberate, she muttered under her breath. She called her liaison at the Pentagon. Patch me through to the JAG office at Fort Belvoir. Tell them I need clearance and transport. I'm going straight to Fairfax PD. She hung up before the reply came. Back at the station, Naomi sat silently in a side room, uncuffed but not unmonitored. A young officer stood watch outside the glass door, clearly rattled by the tension in the building. Word was spreading fast, even inside the department. A few staffers were already whispering that someone important had been locked up. No one wanted to be the one holding the bag when it all collapsed. Inside her room, Naomi finally removed the glasses herself and stared at her own reflection in the black glass. She looked at the bruises forming near her jawline. Her lips were tight, but her eyes didn't flicker. She was calculating. She wasn't here to argue with anyone. She was here to remember everything, record everything, and make sure it never happened to another woman in uniform again. Meanwhile, Vanessa's transport vehicle zipped through suburban intersections, lights off, but speed unchecked. The driver, an Air Force logistics officer, didn't ask questions. He had orders. Vanessa was already reviewing case law, scrolling through examples of abuse of power and jurisdictional overreach. She wasn't just going to defend her sister. She was going to rip apart every policy that let this happen in the first place. At the same moment, Jordan stood near the edge of the crowd, holding his phone high. His notifications had gone insane. Cable networks were now resharing his video. News outlets were calling for interviews. Someone from MSNBC had DM'd him directly. "We'd like to feature your footage. Are you willing to speak on camera?" Jordan, just 17, didn't know what to do, but he knew this much. He'd seen something wrong, and for once the world didn't look away. Inside the station, Roche stood at her desk, pretending to scroll through emails. Her eyes flicked toward the security feed. Naomi was still sitting, still silent. But Roche knew that wouldn't last long. Something was about to give. Down the hall, McAllister watched the online metrics climbing through a backdoor monitor his PR team used for risk assessments. He didn't say a word, but his jaw tensed. The woman he thought was just another traffic stop had become a nationwide headline. And now her sister, the one with federal clout, was landing. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a lit match. The Pentagon press room buzzed with tension before the cameras even rolled. Journalists shuffled in tightly packed rows, whispering across glowing screens. Behind the podium, the Department of Defense seal glinted under artificial lights. A civilian press secretary named Alan Merrick, known for his tight-lipped precision, stepped up to the mic with a somber face. No prepared remarks, no teleprompter, just a folder in his hand and the weight of national eyes. "Good morning," Merrick began, clearing his throat. We are aware of the developing situation involving Brigadier General Naomi Grant. Several camera flashes went off. He opened the folder, glanced at a single page, then looked up. General Grant, a decorated officer of 32 years' service, recipient of multiple Distinguished Service Medals, is currently being held in custody by the Fairfax County Police Department. She was detained yesterday evening under circumstances that, as of this moment, remain legally unsubstantiated. The room erupted. Hands shot up. Voices overlapped. Are you confirming the general was arrested? Has she been charged? Why hasn't she been released? Merrick raised a hand to settle the room. We can confirm she has not yet been formally charged with any crime, and we believe her detention constitutes a violation of both civilian due process and military protocol. The silence that followed was thick. We have requested her immediate release, he added. As of now, those requests have not been acknowledged by Fairfax County authorities. A reporter from Military Times stood up without waiting to be called on. Is the Department of Defense prepared to intervene directly? Merrick didn't blink. We are monitoring the situation closely, and we want to remind the American people, Brigadier General Grant is one of ours. That final line echoed like a punch through the press cycle. Within minutes, it was clipped, captioned, and trending. She's one of ours. On Twitter, the hashtag #FreeGeneralGrant exploded. Veterans groups picked it up almost instantly. The American Legion issued a statement condemning the treatment of a service member without just cause. On Reddit, a military forum started a mega-thread with the title, They Tackled a General. What happens now? Retired commanders posted support videos in uniform. TikTok lit up with side-by-side comparisons of Naomi's past speeches at the Pentagon versus the footage of her being pinned to the pavement. On Facebook, her West Point classmates posted graduation photos with the caption, "She wore that uniform for this country, and this country owes her better." In just under an hour, the story leapt beyond the confines of police misconduct. It had become a military scandal. In a small community center in Chicago, an elderly Vietnam veteran named Reggie Daniels wiped tears from his eyes as he watched the clip for the 10th time. "This ain't right," he murmured. "You don't put cuffs on someone who bled for that flag." His wife brought him his hat. He put it on slowly. "Where you going?" she asked. He didn't answer. He just grabbed his cane and walked out the door. By midday, makeshift vigils had sprung up outside recruiting centers. Candles flickered beside folded flags and laminated printouts of Naomi's service record. The grassroots swell wasn't organized, but it was undeniable. Meanwhile, in Fairfax, the sidewalk outside the police department began to fill. At first, it was a handful of silent individuals, some in fatigues, some in civilian clothes, carrying signs that said, "Release her now," or "Justice for Naomi Grant." Then came the families, the fellow soldiers, the off-duty officers who showed up without their uniforms but with fire in their eyes. Vanessa stood at the edge of the gathering crowd, flanked by 2 Army JAG officers she'd called in for legal reinforcement. She hadn't spoken to the press yet. She was saving her voice for the right room. "Ma'am," one of the JAGs said, "do you want us to request a federal injunction?" Vanessa nodded slowly. "Not yet. Let them sweat a little longer. I want the press to see the front of this building filled to capacity." Across the street, media vans began to line the curb. Reporters climbed onto folding ladders, angling for wide shots. Local anchors whispered live updates into handheld mics while keeping their backs to the angry but controlled crowd. Fairfax PD had already issued a boilerplate statement. "We are reviewing all procedures related to the recent detainment of an individual now identified as Brigadier General Naomi Grant. We are committed to transparency and community trust." The statement only added fuel to the fire. One protester, a former Marine named Tony Alvarez, shouted into a bullhorn, "She gave this country her blood and her life, and they treat her like a criminal because of her skin?" Cheers followed. A woman next to him held up a photo of Naomi in uniform, saluting at a burial ceremony. Another sign read, "We don't train our leaders to be tackled by cowards." Officer Emily Roche watched from the window of the second floor, heart pounding. She recognized some of the faces outside, neighbors, veterans, even a few cops from other counties who hadn't yet been forced into silence. The city was holding its breath. Down the hall, Chief McAllister stood behind a locked door, flipping channels as every national network cycled in breaking news banners. His phone had buzzed 37 times in the last hour. He hadn't answered once. Instead, he stared at the screen as Merrick's clip played again. "She's one of ours," McAllister muttered under his breath. "Not anymore." But even he knew he was wrong. The crowd outside wasn't going away. The story wasn't going away. And neither was the general. Inside her holding room, Naomi finally leaned forward in her chair, arms resting on the table. Her lips moved without sound, practicing the first line of the statement she would eventually deliver. Her voice would be calm, clear, and absolute, but not yet. She waited, not for a lawyer, not for an apology. She waited for the door to open. The first night in the Fairfax holding cell was colder than it should have been. Naomi sat on a narrow metal bench bolted to the wall, the fluorescent lights above her humming faintly. Her jacket, confiscated along with her phone and ID, left her in just a plain, dark t-shirt, far from standard issue, but miles away from the respect her uniform once commanded. Across the room, a toilet sat in full view. A single gray blanket was folded in the corner like a cruel joke. Outside her cell, the station had grown quieter as most of the day shift signed out. Still, Naomi hadn't slept. Her posture remained straight, trained from decades of combat readiness. She didn't slouch, she didn't sigh, but she listened. The faint roar of protesters chanting beyond the walls came in waves, muffled but persistent, like the sea pounding a distant shore. At precisely 2:17 a.m., the metallic clank of the outer door echoed down the corridor. Naomi didn't flinch. A set of boots approached, not hurried, not hesitant either, just steady. The night guard stepped into view, a lean, clean-shaven officer in his early 30s, badge number barely visible under the glare. He stood still outside her bars for several seconds, just watching her. Then he cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said softly, not sarcastically, just careful. Naomi met his gaze. "Yes?" He looked down, uncertain, then up again. "Were you in Fallujah?" 2004. Her eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in calculation. "Why do you ask?" The officer glanced around the corridor, confirmed no one else was nearby, then reached into his chest pocket. Slowly, like handling something sacred, he pulled out a small, worn photograph. He slid it through the gap in the bars. Naomi took it, her fingers brushing his just barely. The image was old, printed on a glossy paper faded by time. A group of Marines crouched behind a crumbling wall, all dusty, blood-smeared, some wounded. In the center, one figure stood, clearly issuing none orders, arm raised, face grim and determined. Naomi recognized it instantly. It was her, not in dress blues, in combat gear. "That's my cousin," the officer said, tapping the image gently. "Third from the right." He said some black female officer pulled him out after an IED hit their convoy. Said she walked them 3 miles through sniper territory to the extraction point. Naomi traced her thumb over the man's face. She remembered the day. She remembered the smell of burnt sand, the pressure of the radio against her ear, the tremble in her knees she refused to show. He said she was a ghost in the smoke, didn't even say her name, just that he owed her his life. The officer looked down again. He never knew who she was until he saw that live stream today. Naomi looked up. He's alive? The officer nodded. Married, 2 kids, runs a gym in Missouri now, but he never forgot. There was a beat of silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty. Then, in a whisper, the officer said, I didn't vote for the people who make these policies, but I wear this badge because I thought it meant protecting people like you. Naomi held his gaze. Sometimes, wearing the uniform means protecting others from those who wear the same. He nodded solemnly. I know, not all of us forgot. He reached into his belt and pulled out a folded napkin. On it was a single pen. He slid both through the bars. For whatever you need to say, I'll make sure it gets where it needs to go. Naomi hesitated, then took it. The napkin was standard issue from the break room, but its surface felt heavier somehow, like every word she would write might weigh something in the world. The officer turned and walked away without another word, his footsteps fading into the hum of the station's late-night silence. Naomi unfolded the napkin and uncapped the pen. She sat back down on the bench and placed the napkin flat on her knee. Her hand hovered for a moment before the words began to flow, not dramatic, not angry, just precise. To whom it may concern, she began, I am Brigadier General Naomi L. Grant, United States Army. As of this writing, I remain in custody under unlawful conditions. I issue this statement not as an act of defiance, but as a declaration of identity and fact. Her words filled the tiny square in tight rows, every sentence a line of armor. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't threatening. She was reminding a nation of who she was, reminding a system of what it was doing, reminding herself that no chain, no label, no mugshot could erase what she had earned. When she finished, she folded the napkin neatly into quarters, wrote one word on the outside, statement, and placed it next to the bars. A moment later, the same officer returned and picked it up wordlessly. Their eyes met one last time before. He turned and left. Naomi leaned back against the wall. The chanting outside had softened, or perhaps she had grown used to it. For the first time in hours, she closed her eyes. Not in defeat, but in preparation. She wasn't done. She was just getting started. Next, at dawn, Naomi is moved without warning. Her transfer filmed by Jordan, who's been streaming live all night. By mid-morning, the Fairfax Police Department headquarters no longer felt like a station. It felt like a siege. Emails flooded the internal inboxes. The front desk phones rang off the hook. A line of reporters, military officials, civil rights attorneys, and even a representative from the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee began forming outside the precinct entrance. Uniformed officers stood behind locked glass doors, exchanging nervous glances as more camera crews arrived by the hour. Inside, the command center was in chaos. A dozen subpoenas and formal inquiries sat unopened on Chief Ryan McAllister's desk. 3 different branches of the federal government were demanding access to the detained Brigadier General Naomi Grant. The Department of Defense sent 2 formal representatives. The Secretary of the Army's office followed up with an emergency request for information, and several high-ranking veterans had traveled from neighboring states to demand a face-to-face meeting with her. McAllister, pale and visibly sweating, barked orders to staff to delay responses, claim internal review, and under no circumstances allow direct access to the detainee. We are not granting interviews. No statements, no press access, not until we control the narrative, he ordered. But outside, the narrative had already slipped from his hands. Major news networks picked up Jordan's original live stream and ran it on loop. The footage of Naomi being slammed to the ground by Officer Hensley, coupled with the viral audio of her calm yet chilling warning in the squad car, ignited every social media feed across the country. Hashtags like #Grant was targeted and #Justice for Naomi climbed the trending charts. The Washington Post released a breaking story at 10:43 a.m. Retired Brigadier General detained without charges. Fairfax police silent. The silence only made the noise louder. At 11:12 a.m., a bombshell dropped. A reporter from an independent watchdog outlet named Miranda Keyes had gone digging into Officer Hensley's disciplinary history. What she found made headlines within minutes. 3 years earlier, Hensley had been temporarily suspended after a civilian filed an excessive force complaint. The complaint, lodged by a Latino mechanic named Ernesto Caldera, detailed how Hensley allegedly dragged him from his vehicle, slammed his head against a patrol car, and later falsified the report. The case was quietly settled out of court, sealed, no admission of wrongdoing, no internal charges filed. Miranda's article included a redacted police report, still showing just enough to match the description with Hensley's personnel file. That same morning, a retired Navy SEAL named Marcus Stone appeared on MSNBC, visibly furious. "You don't get to treat a decorated officer like a threat because she's black and wearing civilian clothes," he said. If it were a white colonel in khakis, he'd be offered coffee, not a takedown. Public anger metastasized into pressure. Fairfax city officials began receiving emails and calls by the thousands. Members of the city council issued a joint statement calling for transparency. And still, McAllister refused to yield. "We are handling this internally," he repeated in a statement at noon. "Any further information will be released after our review is complete." It didn't help. Miranda Keyes struck again. By 1:45 p.m., she had obtained an internal email, leaked anonymously, showing that Hensley had been flagged twice for behavioral concerns during training. Impatience with authority and aggressive response to perceived disrespect were listed. Another email showed that Hensley had failed a psychological reevaluation 2 years prior, but was allowed back on patrol after a second opinion signed off by a private contractor hired by the department. That revelation sent another shockwave through the media. Civil rights groups now demanded a full federal audit of the Fairfax Police Department's hiring and disciplinary practices. Local journalists, sensing blood, started calling former colleagues, ex-department employees, and even family members of prior complainants. A rumor began circulating online that Hensley had been transferred from 2 previous districts for similar concerns. Though unconfirmed, the rumor gained traction, spreading like wildfire. Inside the department, officers grew anxious. A few quietly removed Hensley's nameplate from his locker. Others avoided the break room altogether. One officer, caught on a hot mic, muttered, "We're protecting the wrong damn person." Meanwhile, Naomi still hadn't been allowed to make a formal call. Her sister, Vanessa Grant, now in Virginia, had already filed an emergency legal request to gain access, but it remained under review. Protesters gathered outside the station, chanting into megaphones and waving signs. Some held blown-up images of Naomi in uniform. Others carried printed screenshots of the live stream. Then, just before 3 p.m., another piece of surveillance surfaced, this one from a gas station parking lot near a different part of town, dated 11 months earlier. The footage, grainy but clear enough, showed Officer Hensley pulling over a middle-aged black man in business attire. No clear violation was visible. What was visible, however, was Hensley's posture, weapon drawn before he even reached the window. The man, hands raised, was yelling something. No audio, but his fear was unmistakable. The footage ended before resolution, but it was time-stamped, and it matched a complaint that had mysteriously disappeared from department records. The media pounced. By evening, The word pattern was used in every article. A CNN segment declared, "Fairfax officer has troubling history." On Reddit and Twitter, citizen sleuths began building a timeline of Hensley's prior stops, matching names, dates, and patterns of escalation. Chief McAllister called an emergency meeting, but inside the precinct, not everyone was playing along. One intern leaked a memo showing Hensley's recent commendation, issued just 6 weeks earlier, for decisive action in a high-tension stop. It named Naomi's stop as the incident. The public went ballistic. How could that commendation have been issued before the story broke? Who signed off on it? At 5:20 p.m., the Department of Justice issued a formal notice. An independent inquiry was being opened, and Naomi Grant's detention was to be reevaluated immediately. The pressure had turned from heat to rupture. Cameras were stationed 24/7 outside the precinct, every move now broadcast. But the final blow came from a camera no one expected, an old security feed that revealed what they all feared. The hum of old servers and buzzing fluorescent lights filled the small windowless room deep inside Fairfax PD's Technical Operations Unit. Detective Sarah Kane sat alone at her station, surrounded by stacks of dusty evidence drives, aging terminals, and a coffee cup with her name smudged halfway off. On her screen was the encrypted audio file she had secretly recorded during the earlier emergency meeting with Chief McAllister. Her finger hovered over the export button. The decision felt heavier than it should have, but she had already crossed the line by recording the conversation. Now came the part that would either crack the case wide open or cost her everything. With a silent breath, she plugged in her own encrypted external hard drive, a device she had personally wiped and secured. The screen flickered as it accepted the transfer. The progress bar filled slowly, line by line. Sarah glanced at the door, her heart thudding with the steady panic of someone who knew she wasn't just accessing sensitive material, she was safeguarding proof of a cover-up. The recording contained clear instructions from McAllister himself. Do not log the name Naomi Grant, classify the detainee as Jane Doe, and avoid digital fingerprints. The chief had said it in plain language, assuming loyalty from the room. But loyalty had a limit, and Sarah had reached hers the moment she saw the news about Naomi's rank and service. When the file finished copying, she ejected the drive and slid it into the side pocket of her coat. It wasn't much, but it was insurance, both for herself and for the truth. Before she stood, she pulled up the incident report system and confirmed what she feared. Naomi Grant's name still wasn't in the system. She was legally invisible. Kane closed everything down, wiped her tracks, and slipped out of the room unnoticed. As she passed the bullpen, officers still stared at their phones or the large monitor showing cable news coverage of the protest growing outside. Nobody noticed her leave. She walked straight to the back stairwell, heart racing, not stopping until she reached the exit near the restricted garage level. Outside, a cold breeze cut through her jacket as she crossed to the administrative annex. She didn't stop moving until she reached interview room C, a small glass-walled chamber converted into a temporary legal visitation space. Inside, Vanessa Grant sat alone, arms folded across her briefcase. Her face showed calm, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. Sarah entered without knocking. Vanessa didn't rise, but her gaze locked on Sarah's with suspicion. "Detective Kane?" she asked. Sarah nodded, stepped forward, and placed a single manila envelope on the table. "I don't expect you to trust me," Sarah said, "but this is what I have. Audio from the chief's meeting. It confirms that they deliberately misclassified your sister." Vanessa didn't respond immediately. She opened the envelope, found the small thumb drive inside, and said, "Is it clean?" "Yes. Nothing ties it to me unless someone traces the internal timestamp. I masked it, but still, handle it carefully." Vanessa slid the drive into a protective case inside her briefcase. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah hesitated. because she deserves better. And because what's happening here isn't just illegal, it's wrong. This department shields its own even when it shouldn't. I can't be part of that anymore." Vanessa studied her for a moment longer. "Will you testify if needed?" Sarah hesitated again. "If it comes to that, yes, but you didn't hear that from me yet." A beat of silence passed before Vanessa stood up, briefcase in hand. As Sarah turned to leave, she paused. "She's lucky to have you." Vanessa gave no reaction. She simply walked to the hallway, following the posted signs toward holding area 3. She passed 2 rows of reinforced doors, gave her clearance documents to the officer on duty, and waited. After a 2-minute security delay, the inner door buzzed open, revealing the glass panel where detainees were allowed limited visitor contact. Naomi was already seated inside, her posture straight despite the fatigue in her eyes. The 2 sisters locked eyes. Vanessa didn't speak at first. She stepped forward and placed her hand gently on the glass. Naomi mirrored her. "I'm here, sis," Vanessa whispered. "We're getting you out." Naomi gave a small nod, her jaw tight, but her eyes softened just enough to show she had heard. Behind her, another officer shifted uneasily, unsure whether to interrupt. Vanessa turned to the guard. "I've filed an emergency motion. If you delay it, you're in violation of habeas corpus. That's federal." The guard hesitated, then stepped out to confirm with legal. Vanessa turned back to Naomi. "We've got people on the outside, media, veterans, even Capitol Hill, and you've got allies inside, too." Naomi tilted her head, curious. Vanessa only smiled faintly. "Just know someone in here still remembers what you did in Fallujah." Naomi blinked, surprised. Then a breath escaped her lips, not quite relief, but something close. Vanessa checked her watch. "They'll try to block the motion, but we have leverage now. That recording will change everything." Naomi leaned in. "Do they know yet?" Vanessa shook her head. "Not yet, but they will." The door behind her opened again. The officer returned, looking tense. "You're being summoned to the conference room, Ms. Grant. Someone from the DOJ just arrived." Vanessa stepped back. "Good. Let them hear it." Naomi stood. "Tell Mom I'm okay." Vanessa pressed her hand once more to the glass. "She already knows." As Naomi was escorted out of the room, her face was unreadable, but the tide had turned. The wall of silence was cracking. The hearing chamber was unusually packed. Every seat in the Department of Homeland Security's Special Oversight Hall was occupied, the air thick with tension and camera shutters. The panel of 7 federal officials sat in solemn silence, flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals on each end. The national flag hung behind them, unmoving, as if bracing for what was about to be said. A low murmur rippled through the crowd as the next witness was called. "Jerome Tate, retired sergeant, Fairfax Police Department." A tall black man in his late 50s rose from the 3rd row. He moved slowly but deliberately, every step toward the podium echoing years of buried weight. He adjusted the mic, then cleared his throat. "Before I begin, I want to say that speaking here today could end friendships I've had for decades, but silence would end something even greater, my integrity." The room fell quiet. 21 years on the force, I trained rookies, I negotiated crises, and I saw the system from the inside. What happened to Brigadier General Naomi Grant wasn't a mistake, it was a pattern. A murmur surged again, louder this time. Jerome didn't flinch. "Back in 2013, I was dispatched to a stop on Maple Creek Drive. A young black man was sitting in a Lexus, parked, engine off on a public street. When I arrived, my supervisor whispered, 'Same drill. He's just here to stir trouble. Intimidate him a little, run the ID, and if he mouths off, bring him in.' I didn't follow through. I told the kid to go home. Later that week, I got reassigned to desk duty." One of the senators leaned forward. Are you suggesting there's a coordinated directive within Fairfax PD to target individuals based on race? Jerome looked straight ahead. I'm not suggesting. I'm stating. It's quiet, it's coded, but it exists. A gasp rolled through the rows. Reporters scribbled faster. Was this limited to your precinct? No, ma'am. It was cultural. You either learned the code or you got frozen out. The panel chair, Secretary Holland, interjected. Mr. Tate, are you aware that your statement could trigger a formal civil rights investigation into Fairfax Police Department? Yes, and I came prepared. He pulled a flash drive from his jacket pocket and handed it to the attending clerk. These are excerpts from internal briefings, shift logs, and communications. Some I recorded after realizing I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. The projection screen lit up behind him. A transcript appeared. Suspect doesn't belong. Check for parole or priors. Don't flag the call yet. Another. Too articulate. Might be a lawyer. Handle discreetly. A third. Just make her uncomfortable enough to leave. Eyes widened across the chamber. Jerome continued. They don't say black outright, but we knew. We always knew. In the front row, Vanessa Grant clenched her fists. Her eyes locked on the man revealing what she'd always suspected but couldn't prove. Behind her, retired military officers shifted uncomfortably in their suits. What you saw in that viral video, Jerome said, wasn't an outlier. Officer Hensley didn't act alone. He acted in line with a mindset that's been rewarded, quietly, consistently, and with plausible deniability. Do you have direct knowledge of conversations involving Officer Hensley? One of the panelists asked. Yes. In 2019, Hensley was frustrated he'd been overlooked for a tactical assignment. He said, and I quote, "They want the clean-cut types now. But sometimes a guy's just got to remind these people who's in charge." Nobody said a word. He got his transfer 6 months later. Did you report any of this? Twice. Both times I was told, "We'll look into it." After that, I was moved to basement filing. I left the force 2 years later. The chamber sat in silence. The weight of every word felt heavier than the last. Secretary Holland turned to her colleagues. Let the record show that Mr. Tate's evidence has been accepted and logged under federal exhibit review. The gavel struck once, crisp and final. As Jerome stepped down, Naomi's name echoed in whispers across the room. Reporters huddled, advisors stepped out with urgent calls, and multiple media outlets switched to live coverage. Outside the building, protesters watched screens projected onto building walls. Veterans in uniform, clergy, and students stood together, some with candles, others with handmade signs reading "Justice for Naomi" and "Uniform Exemption." Inside, the tone shifted. A panelist whispered to another, "This could trigger something big." Across the city, the mayor's office issued a carefully worded statement of concern. The governor tweeted that no one, regardless of uniform or badge, is above the law. Social media erupted. Naomi's photo in uniform began trending next to hashtags like #system on trial and #Tate testifies. At that very moment, in a dark corner of the Fairfax PD evidence room, Sarah Kane saw the ripple beginning. She watched the hearing live from her phone, then looked at the sealed envelope in her locker. Her voice would be next. But for now, the world had heard one truth, spoken not by an outsider, but by someone who wore the same badge. Jerome Tate's testimony would be rewatched, quoted, and debated, but it had done what years of complaints, lawsuits, and op-eds had failed to do: break the silence from within. As cameras faded to commercial, Secretary Holland's voice rang with finality. Based on today's testimony and evidence, this committee formally recommends a federal investigation into Fairfax Police Department under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. And as Jerome took his seat again, the hall buzzing with disbelief and urgency. The screen behind him faded to black. But outside, the noise only grew. The fight was no longer theoretical, and back in her cell, Naomi lifted her head, hearing a distant chant from beyond the walls, her name carried like a promise. The next step would come swiftly. Congress had made its move. The transition was already in motion. In a quiet room deep within the Office of Military Internal Affairs, Major Caroline Myers leaned over a series of confidential dossiers stacked on her desk. The lighting was harsh and sterile, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the overhead ventilation. She wasn't supposed to be looking into Naomi Grant, at least not officially. But when the Pentagon call had come through regarding a general being unlawfully detained, Myers had taken it upon herself to dig further. She opened a digital archive labeled Category 4 Disruption Risk Domestic. Scrolling through a list of flagged individuals, her eyes froze on one name, Grant Naomi L. The file had been marked sensitive, locked under dual key authorization. Myers keyed in her clearance code and inserted a biometric token. The folder opened. Inside were surveillance reports dated as far back as 9 months prior, photos of Naomi exiting civil rights conferences, audio transcripts of her speeches warning about racial bias and military recruitment, and a list of associates labeled ideological sympathizers. Most disturbing, however, was a document labeled Operational Consideration, Silent Watch. It authorized passive surveillance of Naomi Grant due to potential incitement against federal law enforcement culture. The document bore signatures from 2 high-ranking officials, one of whom was retired. Myers leaned back, breath shallow. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't routine. Naomi Grant had been watched, profiled, and flagged months before a single patrol car pulled her over. Her eyes narrowed on a grainy photo captured outside Arlington National Cemetery. Naomi, in full-dress uniform, had just spoken at a private veterans memorial about the need for military accountability. In the image, a white SUV lurked in the background. She cross-referenced the plate. The registration returned to the Fairfax County Police Department. Assigned vehicle, Officer Mark Hensley. The blood drained from her face. Naomi hadn't just been randomly stopped. Hensley had known. He'd followed her before. With shaking fingers, Myers opened an internal comms terminal and typed an encrypted message to the office of the Inspector General. Recommend immediate review. Possible violation of Article 92, unlawful surveillance and premeditated targeting of active military officer. Evidence attached. She hit send and shut the file. Meanwhile, across town, a local high school student named Jordan Morales uploaded a new video to his viral livestream channel. The clip was taken from 3 weeks before Naomi's arrest. It showed a white SUV circling the parking lot of a community town hall where Naomi had been a guest speaker. The camera zoomed in on the vehicle's license plate, clearly revealing the Fairfax PD mark. "Is this the same cop who tackled her?" Jordan asked the camera, because if so, dude was stalking her. The comment section exploded. Hashtag pattern of harassment trended within the hour. Major networks picked up the footage, analyzing timestamps, guest lists, and cross-referencing Naomi's travel schedule with patrol car sightings. A clear pattern began to form. Hensley hadn't encountered Naomi by accident. He had been tracking her movements. Back at the police station, Officer Sarah Kane, still operating discreetly, received the footage via a burner email. Her hands trembled as she replayed it over and over. She opened her drawer, took out the thumb drive with the command room audio, and stared at it in silence. What had started as a traffic stop was now unraveling into something bigger. A deliberate act of targeting, possibly sanctioned by someone higher up. And she wasn't the only one watching. In a secured conference room at the Pentagon, Vanessa Grant sat across from General Harold Reese, head of military legal affairs. "We have confirmation from internal," he said, sliding a file across to her. "Your sister was not only surveilled, she was profiled under an outdated domestic extremism filter, one that was supposedly sunsetted 5 years ago." Vanessa flipped through the papers, jaw tightening. "They kept this off the books?" "Yes," Reese replied, voice grim. "And that means someone powerful didn't want it exposed." Vanessa closed the folder. "Then we exposed them." At that very moment, a whistleblower post emerged on a veterans advocacy forum. Posted anonymously, it included internal documents showing that Naomi's recent policy recommendations, particularly those pushing for reforms in military law enforcement cooperation, had ruffled feathers in both local and federal circles. The post included meeting minutes from an interagency discussion where Naomi's name was highlighted under persons of influence needing containment. One comment summed up the growing sentiment. They didn't just arrest her, they planned it. At Fairfax Police HQ, tension grew. Protesters now gathered in shifts. Community leaders, military families, and journalists surrounded the station, demanding transparency. Some held signs showing Naomi's military photo next to her mugshot, captioned, "From honor to hostage." Inside, Chief Ryan McAllister locked his office door and reviewed the growing media crisis. Every news cycle peeled back another layer of exposure. But what he didn't know, yet, was that a live press conference had just been scheduled by Naomi's legal team. It would happen in the next 24 hours, and it would reveal everything. Naomi wasn't just going to walk out quietly, she was going to drag the system with her. Meanwhile, Naomi herself sat alone in her holding cell, head tilted toward the ceiling, listening to the distant echo of chants outside. Her fingers held the photo the night guard had given her, and tucked inside her sleeve was the handwritten statement on a napkin. Her silence was temporary. Her next move would be heard by the world. The walls of secrecy had cracked, and the first fracture had already become a flood. The audio file surfaced at midnight. No warning, no preamble, just a blunt headline on a veterans forum that read, "They knew who she was." Attached was a 14-minute audio clip, raw, unfiltered, and devastating. It was the internal meeting Sarah Kane had secretly recorded, uploaded by an anonymous account verified later to be a secondary device she had kept in reserve. The voices in the recording were unmistakable. Police Chief McAllister, Internal Affairs, a few senior officers, but it was one sentence that turned the clip into wildfire. "She's a brigadier general, and we're burying that fact." That line, delivered in a cold, calculated tone by one of the senior captains, ripped through the online forums like a detonator. Within 2 hours, the file had been downloaded over 300,000 times. Links spread across Twitter, Telegram, Reddit, even parenting forums and college message boards. By sunrise, "They knew" trended globally. It wasn't just proof of incompetence, it was proof of intent. By 8 a.m., cable news anchors played segments of the recording on loop. Former service members appeared on air, red-faced with rage. One Vietnam veteran leaned into the microphone and said, "They targeted one of our own. A woman who wore the flag, bled for it, and they treated her like a nobody." Civil rights organizations issued joint statements, and even Pentagon staffers leaked memos expressing concern over the ongoing suppression of military identity and rights. Conservative media scrambled to contain the fire. On one flagship morning show, Senator Clyde Whitaker, a Republican stalwart from Georgia known for his hardline stance on policing, demanded that the audio file be taken down immediately. "This is dangerous misinformation," he insisted. "Unauthorized recordings should not dictate our legal processes." But the hosts hesitated. One of them, Herself, a Navy wife, raised an eyebrow and said, "But, Senator, the voice in the recording admits they knew she was military. Shouldn't we be talking about that?" Whitaker's attempt backfired. He was clipped mid-sentence, his face flushed and fumbling, and the clip went viral with the caption, "Even he couldn't spin it." Kane's voice, measured, nervous, but clear, stood out in the middle of the file. She said, "I don't know why we're acting like this won't come back to haunt us. That woman saved lives overseas, and now we're pretending she's a random suspect?" Her words turned her from anonymous leaker to reluctant hero. Reporters camped outside her apartment. Social media dubbed her the conscience in blue. But Kane, knowing she had just painted a target on her back, disappeared. Her attorney issued a brief statement. "Officer Kane acted in defense of justice and accountability. She will speak in due time." Meanwhile, at the Fairfax Police Department, silence consumed the hallways. Officers passed one another with wary glances. Phones rang non-stop. News helicopters hovered. McAllister ordered an internal lockdown and activated a PR firm, but the damage had been done. Officers not involved in the cover-up began requesting transfers. One anonymously told a local paper, "We're supposed to serve the people, not bury them." Naomi's attorney, Vanessa Grant, stood at a podium outside the courthouse and declared, "This isn't just about Naomi. This is about a system that punishes silence and rewards silence over truth. We will not be silent." The speech was broadcast live, and the effect was immediate. Plans for a nationwide silent protest ignited. Not a riot, not a chant, a visual message. Veterans, active duty soldiers, military families, and civilians would gather in designated city squares, wearing their uniforms or their loved ones, and stand still for 1 hour. No signs, no slogans, just presence. The call spread like a wave. Hashtags morphed into concrete plans. Digital maps marked protest zones. Schools sent letters home urging safety. Police departments braced. One viral image showed a young girl in her grandfather's oversized army jacket holding a sign that simply said, "She protected us. Who protects her?" Meanwhile, inside her cell, Naomi was finally handed a newspaper. The front page featured a photo of the silent protest announcement and an article titled "Honor in Chains." She folded the paper once, then twice, and pressed it gently against her chest. Her jaw clenched, not in anger, but in silent preparation. Her time was coming. What no one had expected, however, was how far the ripple would travel. In Germany, where a NATO base once hosted Naomi for a strategy briefing, a platoon of soldiers stood silently in formation, holding her photo. In Atlanta, an entire chapter of retired African-American paratroopers signed an open letter calling for an overhaul of how law enforcement is allowed to interface with military personnel. Pressure mounted on Capitol Hill. Moderate senators called for hearings. Generals spoke privately with journalists. One anchor summed it up best. "This is no longer a local case. This is a national reckoning." As the hour of the protest drew near, organizers released a final statement. "We will not chant, we will not scream, but the world will hear us." The words rang like thunder across every timeline and inbox. Naomi's story was no longer just a cautionary tale. It was a mirror, and millions were about to hold it up to the face of power. The streets of Fairfax were unnaturally still, not because there was no one present, but because the crowd that had gathered refused to speak. As dawn painted the sky in muted streaks of orange and gray, over 800 former service members took their places. Each wore some piece of their past: pressed uniforms, faded medals, old unit patches sewn onto jackets that no longer fit. Some leaned on canes, some held hands with their grandchildren, but all of them stood in utter silence facing the front steps of the Fairfax Police Department. At the center of the line, a woman in her 70s walked forward. Her hair was silver, her spine slightly bowed, but her grip was firm as she clutched a framed photograph of Naomi Grant. She lowered herself onto one knee, slowly, reverently, and raised the photo toward the police station. The camera zoomed in as a single tear rolled down her cheek. "She saved my grandson in Mosul," she whispered to no one in particular. "He wouldn't be here without her." Around her, candles flickered. Some were held in gloved hands. Others sat atop makeshift memorials made of boots and folded flags. The silence was not empty. It pulsed with decades of service, of grief, of promises made and broken. Helicopters hovered above, their spotlights circling the scene. Every major cable news network had tuned in. Social media platforms broadcasted continuous live streams. Within 3 hours, the silent march had reached 8 million viewers globally. Hashtags trended not just in English, but in Spanish, French, Korean, and Arabic. The world was watching. Inside the station, the mood was fraying. Officers paced, unsure whether to step outside or retreat deeper. Chief McAllister watched the live footage in his office, jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. "What the hell are we supposed to do?" someone muttered. He didn't answer. He knew the answer already. No press release could fix this. No spin could neutralize the image of that elderly woman on one knee. No procedural memo could undo the sight of veterans saluting one of their own. Downstairs, Emily Roche stood in front of Naomi's holding cell. The two women stared at each other through the narrow window in the reinforced door. Roche didn't speak. She didn't need to. Naomi gave her a slow nod, controlled, measured, but full of weight. Roche nodded back and turned away. In the command center, calls flooded in. From the governor's office, from defense, from civil rights attorneys. From every angle, pressure mounted. One by one, the excuses fell apart. "We're reviewing the charges," became, "We're unsure how this happened," and finally collapsed into, "We're preparing for her release." The clock ticked past midnight. Protesters didn't leave. They remained, unmoved, silent, holding their candles like shields. Several officers were dispatched to make an official announcement, but none wanted the job. Eventually, Roche volunteered. She stepped out of the building alone, holding a single document. Reporters surged forward. She said nothing. Instead, she walked to the line of veterans, stopped in front of the elderly woman still kneeling, and handed her the release form. The woman read it in silence. Then, without fanfare, she stood up and stepped back. The crowd parted. A few moments later, the front doors opened. Naomi Grant stepped outside. Her wrists bore the faint marks of cuffs. Her eyes were tired, but her posture remained proud. She wore the same civilian jacket she had on during her arrest. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They stood in formation and saluted. Naomi raised her hand and returned the salute. A helicopter spotlight bathed her in pale white light. The world watched in breathless stillness. The moment stretched. Then, without a word, Naomi descended the steps and walked forward, past the reporters, past the cameras, straight to the elderly woman who had knelt for her. Naomi stopped in front of her. The woman lifted the photograph. Naomi looked at it, then reached forward and embraced her. For the first time in hours, the silence broke, but not with noise, with breath, a collective, quiet exhale that seemed to carry the weight of generations. Naomi turned to the cameras. "I'm going home," she said, "but this isn't over." She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. The march had said everything. Inside the building, McAllister slammed his office door shut. His phone rang again, this time from Washington. He didn't answer. Back outside, veterans slowly began to disperse. Not with banners or chants, but with dignity. Some left their candles behind, letting them burn out on the pavement. Others folded small flags and tucked them under their arms. Naomi got into an unmarked sedan driven by her sister. As the car pulled away, a drone followed overhead, transmitting the image of her silhouette against the soft glow of protest candles. No formal apology was issued. No charges were publicly dropped. No officials took responsibility. But Naomi was free, and the silence had spoken louder than any press conference. As they drove off into the night, Vanessa reached over and gently touched Naomi's arm. "You ready for the next part?" she asked. Naomi didn't answer right away. She looked out the window at the receding crowd, then said, "Let's show them what leadership really looks like." Naomi Grant stepped into the chill of the early morning air, her boots striking the concrete steps of the Fairfax Police Department with deliberate force. The crowd, still cloaked in silence, parted for her. No one shouted, no one applauded. They simply moved, reverently, giving her space as if she were royalty returning from exile. Flashbulbs snapped, news cameras followed every step she took. Her shoulders stayed square, her chin lifted. She said nothing. In her left hand she carried nothing but a single object, her military badge, polished, glinting under the soft lights. Naomi didn't raise a fist. She didn't hold a sign. She lifted that badge above her head, steady and unwavering, so every camera could see it. The emblem of her service, the proof of who she was, the answer to the lie they tried to write over her name. A young reporter, likely no older than 24, pushed gently to the front of the press line. His microphone trembled in his hand. "General Grant," he called out, his voice cracking from nerves or awe, "why haven't you made a statement?" Naomi turned to him, eyes calm but sharp. "Because," she said, "I'm letting them say it all themselves." Then she walked forward. The reporter blinked, stunned. Around him, journalists whispered, scribbled, rewound their audio feeds, making sure they caught every word. That single sentence rippled through the crowd like an electric current. Naomi kept walking. Every step away from the police station was a step back into her own story. But it wasn't just hers anymore. Her sister Vanessa stood by the car, door open. She didn't rush. She didn't wave. She waited. The crowd stayed respectfully still as Naomi approached. She paused just long enough to scan the sea of faces, some angry, some in tears, some quietly grateful. She nodded once, then she got in the car. Vanessa slid into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb. The silence behind them remained whole, sacred. It wasn't until they'd turned off the main road that Naomi finally spoke. "We have work to do." Vanessa didn't look over. "Already started," she said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a red folder, thick with documents, already tabbed and numbered. On the front, "Civil Suit, Fairfax County Police Department et al." Naomi took it, flipped through it. Her eyes scanned names, timestamps, internal memos, video transcriptions, emails flagged for deletion but recovered through subpoena threats. "How deep does it go?" she asked. "Worse than we thought," Vanessa said. "This wasn't just a traffic stop gone wrong. They had protocols for handling high-profile arrests. Someone overrode those systems. There's a paper trail. Then we follow it." Vanessa nodded. "Already filed preliminary paperwork this morning. We're going after not just the department, but every individual who contributed to the cover-up. McAllister, Hensley, their legal advisor, even the dispatcher who changed the log entries." Naomi turned back to the window, watching the world pass by. Sunlight crept between the buildings. People were waking up to headlines they never expected. "And the Justice Department?" she asked. "We're in talks. There's pressure building from the Hill. Some of those old war hawks don't like seeing one of their own treated like this, especially not when you've got stars on your shoulder and a rescue record longer than the Potomac." Naomi smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. "I didn't survive 3 tours to be tackled on a sidewalk." Vanessa's fingers tightened on the wheel. "And we won't let them forget it." As they pulled onto the freeway, Naomi's phone buzzed. It was finally returned to her after processing. hundreds of notifications, missed calls, messages from generals, soldiers, journalists, even strangers. One stood out, a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Ma'am, I was the kid you saved in Fallujah. I saw the live stream. Just wanted to say thank you. The world's watching now." Naomi read it twice, then deleted nothing. "Let's stop waiting for justice," she said quietly. "Let's make it." Vanessa smiled, this time with steel in her eyes, already drafting the federal complaint. Naomi opened the glove compartment and retrieved a pen. "Not just federal," she said. "We take this to the Civilian Review Board, the State Bar, the Department of Defense. We hit them everywhere at once. No more giving them room to spin their version first." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "You're going full scorch and earth?" Naomi nodded. "They underestimated the wrong woman. Back in Fairfax, the footage of her raising that badge became the defining image of the day. Not her mugshot, not the arrest, not the silence. Just her standing tall, holding her badge like a flag. The hashtag, badge held, high overtook every platform. Politicians quoted it. Celebrities reposted it. School teachers printed it out. By noon, the mayor of Fairfax issued a formal statement, but it fell flat. Too vague. Too late. Naomi and Vanessa were already 4 steps ahead. They didn't need a press conference. They had paperwork, proof, and the law. They had lived experience, unimpeachable credentials, and now, public momentum. Naomi placed the red folder on her lap and looked ahead, eyes locked on the road. "We start with Fairfax," she said, "but we don't stop there." Vanessa merged into the fast lane. "Next stop, Richmond." The fight wasn't over. It was just changing arenas, because Naomi had walked out with her head high, and now she was walking straight into battle. The courtroom lights were about to burn brighter than the spotlights of any protest. Inside the Fairfax Police Department, the tension had thickened into something almost physical. Desks were being cleared without words. Lockers were slammed shut. Eyes averted each other in the hallways. A sense of disarray lingered over every shift change, every call dispatch, every clipboard update. Officers whispered in stairwells instead of speaking aloud. Several were choosing silence. Others were preparing exits. By 9 a.m., a sealed envelope was hand-delivered to the HR director's desk. Then another. Then 7 more. 11 officers in total, all mid-level, all with clean records, formally submitted requests for reassignment or voluntary leave. Some cited personal health. Others listed irreconcilable internal conflict with current leadership direction. But the truth echoed louder than any paperwork. They didn't want to be part of a cover-up. An anonymous note attached to one of the resignation letters said it plainly. "We signed up to protect, not participate. We can't wear this badge under these conditions." Word spread fast. By noon, national media caught wind of the internal revolt. It wasn't just Naomi's badge anymore. Now it was the department's. Fairfax PD, long regarded as a well-oiled suburban law enforcement unit, was cracking at its command core. And Ryan McAllister, the man at the top, knew the walls were closing in. He stepped into the press briefing room with a practiced calm. His uniform, crisp, medals displayed just right, voice measured. Cameras clicked. The room went still. "There's been a lot of noise," McAllister began. "A lot of distortion. The media has taken a routine law enforcement encounter and twisted it into something it was never meant to be." Reporters shifted in their seats. Phones captured every syllable. "Let me be clear," he continued, hands spread. "This department followed protocol. This was not about race. This was not about rank. It was about safety and compliance." He avoided Naomi Grant's name entirely. Not once did he acknowledge her title or her service. Instead, he framed the ordeal as a communication breakdown, as if it were a misrouted email, not an unlawful arrest of a brigadier general. "We're conducting a review," McAllister added, "and we ask the public to reserve judgment." But the judgment had already begun, because not long after he stepped off the podium, a new leak emerged, this time in the form of an email. The contents were damning. A forwarded thread, dated the morning after Naomi's arrest, revealed McAllister had instructed supervisors to hold the suspect until further notice. His language was clinical, sterile, cold, but one phrase stood out, highlighted by a whistleblower. "Make it clear that no one is untouchable. We're setting an example." Within hours, the email was plastered across social media, news broadcasts, and veterans forums. The backlash hit hard, not just from the public, but from within. Veteran groups issued official statements denouncing McAllister's leadership. Civil rights organizations called for his immediate suspension. A retired Marine colonel went on CNN and declared, "If that's leadership, then we've lost the meaning of the badge." Meanwhile, Naomi's legal team was already in motion. In Richmond, her attorneys filed the first official documents in the civil case, Naomi Grant versus Fairfax County Police Department et al. The docket listed wrongful arrest, abuse of power, defamation of character, and obstruction of justice. And, unlike the media cycle, the court would not forget titles or timelines. Every minute Naomi spent in a cell, every command ignored, every ID concealed, was now a numbered count in a federal lawsuit. The judge assigned to the case was known for precision and speed. Judge Elizabeth Harmon had presided over major civil rights cases before. She issued a notice of hearing within 48 hours of receiving the case file. It was moving fast. That speed sent shockwaves back through Fairfax PD. Officers now feared being subpoenaed. Some wiped personal devices. Others contacted lawyers. Internal Affairs launched a shadow investigation to determine how many emails had been deleted after the arrest. Vanessa Grant, standing outside the courthouse in Richmond, faced a dozen microphones with the same steadiness Naomi had shown walking out of the station. "We are not suing for revenge," she said. "We are suing because the system chose silence over truth, and silence is not neutral. It is complicit." A journalist asked if Naomi would testify in court. Vanessa nodded. "Absolutely," she said. "My sister is a soldier. She doesn't run from accountability. She stands in it, and she expects others to do the same." Meanwhile, McAllister tried to salvage control. He called an emergency department meeting, demanding loyalty. Only half the chairs were filled. Some didn't show. Others stood but said nothing. Even those who had once defended the arrest now feared the fallout. No one wanted to be on record as supporting the man who said, "Make an example." In a break room downtown, 2 patrol officers reviewed their body cam policies, wondering how many files could be flagged as technical errors before someone came knocking. The department had shifted, and McAllister could feel it. He ordered a new statement drafted, this time softer, with words like review, community trust, and dialogue. But it was too late. The public had already chosen its framing. Naomi Grant wasn't just a symbol. She was a line drawn in concrete, a badge that didn't bend, a mirror held up to power. And now, that mirror was reflecting all the cracks. Across town, Naomi sat in a private room with her legal counsel. They reviewed deposition outlines, media strategy, and coordination with federal investigators. No anger on her face, just focus. Calm, clear, determined. "What happens if they try to settle out of court?" one attorney asked. Naomi looked up, her voice even. "Then they're admitting guilt. But I'm not here to let them buy silence. I'm here to end the pattern." Outside, headlines churned faster than the printers could ink them. But Naomi's war wasn't for the next story cycle. It was for the system that thought it could silence her with cuffs. She had walked out. Now she was walking in, right through the front doors of federal court. The courtroom was still before the storm. A national live stream had already begun, with millions watching across homes, schools, churches, and command posts. The seal of the United States District Court glared behind the judge's bench. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Rows of reporters hunched over laptops, their fingers ready. Veterans in dress uniform stood along the back wall. Naomi Grant entered from the left side, shoulders square, uniform crisp, silver insignia catching the light. She took the stand without hesitation, raising her right hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" the bailiff asked. Her voice was steady. "I do." Her attorney stepped forward. "General Grant," he began, "can you walk the court through the events of June 12th, beginning with the moment you were stopped?" Naomi didn't glance at her notes. She didn't need to. "I was driving through Fairfax County on my way to a scheduled private event. I was in civilian clothes, off duty, unarmed." Her gaze moved across the room, meeting faces. "I was stopped at a temporary checkpoint. No probable cause was stated. The officer asked if I lived in the area. I told him I was just passing through. His hand was already on his weapon before I finished my sentence." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Naomi continued, eyes unwavering. "I reached for my wallet to provide ID, calmly, slowly. But before I could show anything, a second officer, Mark Hensley, ripped open my door and threw me to the ground." "Did you resist?" her lawyer asked. "No," Naomi said, plainly. "I complied. I identified myself as a brigadier general in the United States Army. My badge was in my bag. I told them that. I was ignored." The attorney held up an exhibit. "Is this the badge in question?" "Yes." "And this next exhibit, Exhibit C, is that your bruising from the arrest?" The judge nodded for it to be displayed. A series of photos flashed onto the courtroom monitors. Purple welts across Naomi's wrists, abrasions down one arm, a dark bruise on her temple. The courtroom tensed. "Did they read you your rights?" the lawyer asked. "No." "Were you informed of the reason for your arrest?" "No." "At any point, did they acknowledge your rank?" Naomi's voice cooled, but her eyes stayed firm. "They laughed at it." The attorney gave her space. "Can you tell the court what was going through your mind during the arrest?" Naomi paused. Then she spoke. "It wasn't the pain that shocked me. It wasn't even the cuffs. It was the casualness, the way they moved, like this wasn't new to them, like it was routine. I've led troops through war zones with less hostility than I saw in those first 5 minutes." She looked toward the judge. "They didn't arrest me because I was dangerous. They arrested me because I was visible, because I existed in a space they didn't expect me to occupy." A beat of silence settled. Then she added, "I was the wrong kind of woman in the wrong kind of neighborhood." A woman in the audience wiped her eyes. One of the jurors leaned forward, elbows on knees. "And what happened after you were detained?" her lawyer asked. "They refused to verify my identity. My ID was ignored. My rank was mocked. I was processed as a Jane Doe, photographed with sunglasses still on, fingerprinted without being told my charges. I was told to sign a blank confession form. When I refused, they isolated me in a cell without a clock or phone call for 8 hours. The defense attorney objected, but was overruled. Naomi continued, "I was not allowed to call my lawyer. I was not allowed to speak with a commanding officer. I was not read Miranda rights. I was not logged properly in the system. I was erased while fully awake." The attorney stepped back. "No further questions." The judge turned to the prosecutor. "Cross-examination?" The government's attorney, a young man named Briggs, rose cautiously. "General Grant, you said you identified yourself. Did you present physical identification?" "I attempted to. Naomi replied. It was taken from my possession before I could hand it over. And do you have any proof the officers heard your verbal identification? Naomi didn't blink. Do you have proof they didn't? A few gasps escaped the audience. Briggs stumbled slightly. Let's move on. You mentioned being erased. That's a strong term. Isn't it possible this was simply a clerical error? Naomi leaned forward. When a black woman in uniform is ignored, mocked, detained, and processed without name or charge, after stating her credentials, it is not clerical. It is intentional. The gallery erupted in quiet applause before the judge called for order. The prosecutor cleared his throat. General Grant, are you suggesting this department acted with racial bias? Naomi replied, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm describing what happened. You may draw your own conclusions. The judge nodded. Let's proceed. Naomi's attorney stepped forward. We'd like to enter new video evidence. Footage filmed by a citizen named Jordan Holmes, submitted voluntarily. A large monitor flickered to life. The lights dimmed slightly. The courtroom fell into silence. The video began with static, then stabilized. Jordan's phone, facing the checkpoint from across the street. The footage zoomed in shakily, capturing the moment Officer Hensley pulled open Naomi's door and dragged her out. Her voice was heard clearly. I'm a brigadier general. This is a mistake. Hensley's reply, nice cosplay. The room remained frozen. The next frame showed Naomi's badge on the ground and Hensley's foot pinning it as he knelt on her shoulder. The timestamp glared at the top, June 12th, 6:24 p.m. Then came Jordan's voice, whispered from behind the phone. Yo, that's the woman from the Pentagon talk. She's real. Oh my God, they don't know who they messin' with. The video cut out. The courtroom remained completely still. You could hear a pin drop. The judge slowly leaned forward. Thank you. We'll recess for 15 minutes before continuing with testimony. Naomi stepped down from the stand, the silence still thick around her. Her lawyer didn't speak. He didn't need to. The video had done what no statement could. It had shown what truth looked like when it was visible, undeniable, and captured by a teenage boy on a street corner. As Naomi returned to her seat, she didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply nodded to Vanessa across the aisle. Outside the courthouse, the crowds were growing larger. Inside, the truth had just begun its march forward. The courtroom lights dimmed again as the judge nodded for the technician to begin playback. This time, the source was officially verified. Jordan Holmes's live stream, time-stamped, GPS-matched, and confirmed authentic by digital forensic experts. The screen brightened with a clear shot of the checkpoint at dusk. Traffic rolled slowly. Naomi Grant's sedan came into frame. She was alone. 2 officers approached, one gesturing for her to stop. She complied. Jordan's commentary remained in the background, but now it was muted. This was about the footage. The camera zoomed slightly. Naomi rolled down her window. The audio kicked in clearly. Do you live anywhere near here, ma'am? Officer Hensley asked, his hand already resting on his holster. Naomi's voice was firm but measured. I'm driving through. Not that it should matter. The second officer glanced toward the car's back seat, then whispered something to Hensley. The next moment played without cuts. Hensley yanked open the door and shouted, Get out of the car! Naomi remained seated. I can show you ID, she said, her left hand holding a wallet, her right still on the steering wheel. Get out, he barked, grabbing her by the shoulder. She was pulled from the car and pushed face first onto the pavement. The sound of her skull hitting the asphalt echoed in the courtroom speakers. Naomi did not kick. She did not shout. She did not raise a hand. She simply muttered, You're making a mistake. The footage showed Hensley's knee pressing into her back as he cuffed her. Another officer tossed her purse aside. Then, from the open flap, a military badge slid out. Hensley stepped on it without looking down. Jordan's phone caught everything, zoomed in on the badge, then back to Naomi's face, smeared with blood from a shallow cut above her brow. The video ran on. The officers exchanged a few words, and one of them said, "This one's not from around here. Let's log it quiet." That line made someone in the courtroom gasp. The screen went black. The lights returned. The silence in the courtroom was thicker than before. Naomi sat with her jaw set, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. On the defense bench, the department's attorney, a seasoned litigator named Peter Cole, had visibly shifted. His breathing had grown shallow. He leaned forward on the table, head down. Then, suddenly, he dropped into his chair and covered his face with both hands. For a full 15 seconds, he did not move. No one spoke. The judge broke the silence. "Defense, do you have any objections to the evidence?" Cole didn't lift his head. His co-counsel shook hers slowly. "No objections, Your Honor." Naomi's attorney rose. "Your Honor, we believe this video removes any ambiguity about the events of June 12th. The judge nodded solemnly. "It certainly speaks volumes." Just as the court was preparing to adjourn for the day, a man in the back stood. He wore a navy blazer and gray slacks. His beard was trimmed close, his eyes steady. He held out a folded document. "Your Honor, I request permission to testify." "And who are you?" the judge asked, cautious. "My name is Raymond Ellis. I'm a former officer of the Fairfax Police Department, badge number 28476. The courtroom buzzed again. Naomi turned slightly in her seat. Her attorney narrowed his eyes. The judge looked to the clerk, who pulled up the name on the internal database. After a short pause, she nodded. "He checks out." The judge gave a tight nod. "State your relevance, Mr. Ellis." Raymond stepped forward. "I was a patrol partner of Officer Hensley for 16 months. I have information that I believe directly relates to this case." "Such as?" "He kept a list," Raymond said calmly, "of people he said didn't belong in his neighborhoods. Most were black, some were Hispanic. He called it the sort list." A ripple of shock passed through the gallery. The judge leaned forward. "Do you have any evidence of this list?" Raymond nodded. "I took a photo of it the day I quit. I emailed it to myself. I still have it." "And why are you coming forward now?" "Because I watched that video. Because I've been quiet for too long." The judge sighed. "We'll reconvene in the morning. Mr. Ellis, you'll be placed under oath and interviewed by both legal teams before your testimony." "Understood, Your Honor." Naomi looked at Raymond as he stepped back. Their eyes met briefly. She gave him the faintest nod, less gratitude, more acknowledgement. She didn't need allies who pitied her. She needed those who remembered. The courtroom emptied slowly. Outside, the media storm swirled with renewed fury. Headlines rolled in across every major outlet. Video shows unprovoked force against decorated Army general. Defense lawyer breaks down in court as footage plays. New witness emerges in Naomi Grant trial. Meanwhile, within the department, phones rang off the hook. Internal Affairs launched a parallel review. Whispers of resignations began to circulate. And at the very edge of all that chaos, one question now echoed louder than all others. Who else had been on Hensley's sort list? As the judge left the bench, he paused for a moment and looked back at Naomi. He didn't speak. He just looked. And in that silent glance, there was no doubt tomorrow's testimony could shift the ground beneath them all. The chamber of the United States Capitol was unusually quiet as Marcus Grant took the stand. A former Special Forces operator with scars, both seen and unseen, he stood not just as a brother, but as a witness to the country his sister had given her life to serve. "Naomi could have left," he began. "She had offers, consulting gigs, think tanks, defense contractors, but she stayed, not because she had to, because she believed this uniform meant something. His voice wavered only once when he added, "They didn't know who they laid hands on, but now the whole country does." That line triggered a standing ovation from the gallery. Later that day, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee submitted a draft titled the Naomi Grant Act, proposing national limits on local police authority in handling high-ranking government officials without oversight. The headlines the next morning read, "Congress moves to check police overreach, inspired by General Grant." 2 weeks later, a federal court delivered its verdict. Naomi Grant had won. The jury awarded her $12 million in damages and issued a formal recommendation for the complete restructuring of the Fairfax Police Department's training and oversight protocols. Reporters swarmed her as she exited the courthouse, but Naomi stunned them again. She refused the payout. Instead, she demanded the funds be allocated toward a newly established officer training scholarship focused on implicit bias, cultural competency, and conflict de-escalation. "If this system is broken," she said, "we're not patching holes. We're building new beams." Plans for a White House ceremony honoring her service were immediately set into motion. 6 months later, the Police Training Academy of Virginia saw its largest incoming class in over a decade. Standing at the podium in full uniform, Naomi Grant, now retired but active as a federal advisor, delivered the keynote. "You don't get to choose who matters. The badge doesn't give you that right. It gives you a duty to see everyone as someone." The hall was still until a cadet in the back stood up. "Ma'am, I joined this program because of you." A camera crew from CNN captured the moment, running a national special that evening titled, "General Grant Turned Injustice into Policy." The final chapter unfolded quietly, away from flashbulbs and courtrooms. Naomi sat in a rocking chair on the back porch of her modest Virginia home. A journalist asked her, "Do you regret what happened?" She smiled, slow and certain. "I only regret not speaking out sooner, but I'll never regret standing up." She paused, then added, "Don't wait until you're in handcuffs to value your freedom." The camera panned up to a wooden plaque above her door. It read, "Justice is a habit, not a moment." That image would become iconic, a closing shot replayed across networks and classrooms, a symbol not just of one woman's resistance, but of a country still learning how to listen. And so, from a quiet roadside stop in Fairfax to the marble halls of Congress, the story of Brigadier General Naomi Grant became more than a cautionary tale. It became a turning point. It wasn't just about a wrongful arrest. It was about what happens when a system built on authority collides with a woman forged in duty, honor, and truth. Naomi never asked to become a symbol, but by standing tall, she gave a voice to thousands who'd been silenced. Her silence when released, her refusal to retaliate, and her choice to invest in the future rather than settle scores. Each action carved a new path for what justice could look like in America. This story challenges us to rethink power, prejudice, and the quiet courage it takes to stay standing when the world wants you erased. It reminds us that dignity isn't granted by a badge, and leadership isn't earned in moments of comfort, but in storms of injustice. Naomi didn't just walk out of that police station. She walked into history. Now it's your turn. What would you have done in Naomi's place? Would you have stayed silent or spoken out? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that matter. Because voices like Naomi's deserve to echo long after the headlines fade.